The FOMC meeting has left investors in a very tough situation. People are not sure whether or not to be bullish or bearish with what Jerome Powell mentioned over the last 24 hours. We're going to dumb it down and break it down for you guys so you can understand my thoughts on it and where I see the markets going from here. So if you are new to the channel and you want to stay up to date with crypto, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and let's dissect this for you guys. So if we take a look at crypto fear and greed index over the last 30 days, we are still in fear. And let me remind you that everybody was telling you that, this FOMC meeting was going to be the game changer for everything. We were talking about quantitative tightening, talking about interest rate cuts, and talking about better liquidity conditions going forward. Now, yesterday, we actually made a video and said, what if QT doesn't end right now? And what if that situation happens? What to look for? We were talking about several coins in that video. If you didn't see it, have a look at it. But right now, it's kind of what we've seen. We're seeing fear in the markets. And let's take a look at what the FOMC actually had in store for us. So first and foremost, if we take a look at the interest rate cuts, they did go ahead and cut the interest rates by 0.25 basis points. This was obviously what we were expecting. No big news in that sense, because the Fed basically had said, labor markets are going down right now. They're not as good as they once thought they were. And inflation basically has been put aside because it's stagflation with US tariffs. So with that, we absolutely knew that this interest rate cut was going to happen. We were talking about it in our Discord for quite some time. But what we also mentioned was that quantitative tightening was likely to end. We, saw banks analyze it and think that it was going to happen during the FOMC meeting. But we have here this sentence that basically says the committee has decided to conclude the reduction of its aggregate securities holdings on December 1st. So basically what this means, it means that come December 1st, if of course, nothing changes, they're going to go ahead and stop quantitative tightening. And no, this does not mean quantitative easing. So this is a good thing, but it's not happening now, and it's only happening in about a month's time. So with that in mind, because we all are holding altcoins and we're waiting for the altcoin season, I'm going to share with you guys some of my thoughts as to what could happen in the month of November before QT really stops. And that is, if we take a look at the altcoins chart versus Bitcoin, it could likely lead us to believe that there might be more downside pressure between alt versus Bitcoin. But I'm going to get into a little bit of a caveat here, because even though alt versus Bitcoin may continue to go down, the US value of altcoins may go up if Bitcoin's value also goes up. So hear me out here. If we take a look at this relationship, the last time the total 3 minus USDT versus Bitcoin bottomed out was in 2019 when the Fed ended quantitative tightening. Now, as we know, the Fed is about to end quantitative tightening, but that's happening December 1st. So we still have a full month of, this relationship potentially continuing to go down as Bitcoin continues to gain dominance in the market. And as you guys know, for us to really have an altcoin season, well, we need Ethereum to be at all-time highs and to relatively stay there. And for that to happen, well, we need Bitcoin to likely reach a new all-time high. And then we're going to see liquidity rotate to Bitcoin, to Ethereum, to finally altcoins. But I don't think altcoins really start running until we get the end of QT, which is what we saw in 2019. The Fed ended QT, and then you saw altcoins slowly but surely gain, over Bitcoin. Yes, we have the COVID-19 crash here, but we do see that when the Fed ended quantitative tightening, even though it is, in a different year of the cycle, it still made alts versus Bitcoin stop, or it bottomed that relationship out. And of course, we have COVID as the outlier here. And once we really broke out of there, we had, this massive altcoin season that we saw in 2021. Yes, the Fed was printing money, money here, and it's not going to be the case this time around. But going back to where we are right now, we could potentially, in my opinion, continue seeing this relationship kind of just slowly but surely bleed out here in the next month before seeing the Fed end quantitative tightening and before seeing this relationship from altcoins to Bitcoin to really start moving up backwards. Because ever since the Fed started doing quantitative tightening, if you look at, when they did start this, it was in May of 2022. So if we go to May of 2022, which is right around here, well, altcoins have only been going down versus Bitcoin, and that's even before May 2022. It literally started in January of 2022, where altcoins have continued to go down against Bitcoin, and the Fed started quantitative tightening in May of 2022, just amplifying the whole situation from alts to Bitcoin. But if you take a look at Bitcoin's chart here, I'm going to do, what we always have showed you guys on the channel. If we take a look at the macro bull market, Bitcoin is still going up, even though it's down, roughly 0.5% today after the FOMC meeting, when everybody thought it was going to go to the new all-time highs. Well, that's not the case. Oftentimes, what people want is not what the market does. And right now, we are still in this macro uptrend because Bitcoin is still above the 50-week moving average. I think we're all in agreement that, this chart still looks very good. And before turning bearish on this, you would have to really see a whole reversal on that 50-week moving average, which would ultimately bring down Ethereum as well as alts. But we're not there yet, and I don't think we're going to get there before we end quantitative tightening. I do think that this next month is going to be very interesting for Bitcoin as well as altcoins. And if you take a look at Bitcoin dominance, this is another very interesting spot because Bitcoin dominance, ever since mid-September, has continued to go up, which essentially means that since September onwards, we haven't seen good gains on altcoins versus Bitcoin because Bitcoin's gaining dominance on altcoins. So again, it all goes back to the theory that if we really think altcoins are going to bottom when QT ends, well, then we have a whole other month of Bitcoin potentially pushing higher, the dominance of Bitcoin likely pushing higher, bringing the relationship of alts versus Bitcoin lower. But again, you have to realize that if the price of Bitcoin goes up, it doesn't mean that the price of altcoins won't go up in terms of USD value. We're talking about Bitcoin versus altcoin relationship and not so much the value of your altcoin in US dollars. But of course, nobody has a crystal ball and nobody can really, tell you what's going to happen. All we can look at is charts and historical data. We are still making higher lows on Ethereum. And if you look at Ethereum versus Bitcoin, we are still doing so. The same thing here, higher lows on Ethereum, and we've been in a downtrend from ETH Bitcoin since the end of August. So it's been now 2 months that ETH Bitcoin is slowly dragging down. You're seeing altcoins, slowly drag down. And again, liquidity may just rotate back into Bitcoin for the final time, pushing it to a new all-time high. Come December 1st, we get end of quantitative tightening, and then we could see altcoins really push forward from there. That's going to be my thesis for what's going to happen in November. And the other thing that really happened in that FOMC meeting is the fact that the Fed came out and said, you know what, the rate cuts in December are not actually guaranteed when we thought that they were basically guaranteed. If we take a look at what analysts are predicting, have a look at this. This is very interesting because now we only have about 70% chance of a 0.25 cut come mid-December. And if we go back to our Discord, this is just a few days before the FOMC. We had, 96% chance of a 0.25 cut in December. So in the matter of just a few hours over the FOMC meeting with what Jerome Powell was saying, he's basically saying that they're going to wait for more data to see if a cut is necessary in December, which has brought this percentage from 96 all the way down to 70. Now, of course, we're still in agreement here that we're likely going to get a cut, although Powell has basically left the door open to say, well, we're not sure and we're going to let that data really drive our decision in December. Now, for me, I think that they are just being cautious like they have over the last few decisions. They keep on saying it's going to be a data-driven decision, and they have said that they're now focused more on labor markets than inflation because they've kind of discarded inflation due to US tariffs and having the stagflation that we currently still have. But data is still going to drive their decisions, and they're going to put more emphasis on the US labor markets. So if the US labor markets don't actually perform all that well, the Fed is going to continue cutting rates, which is ultimately going to lead to better liquidity conditions, and that could compound on top of quantitative tightening to really bring that bullish sentiment into December for your altcoins that, of course, we're all still holding. So that is what I'm expecting over the next month. We are likely going to continue seeing Bitcoin gain dominance over altcoins, but that doesn't mean that altcoins in USD value isn't going to go up. And if we take a look at what others are saying, well, there is a lot to digest today. The Fed did cut interest rates, like we said. They're signaling that the path forward is far from certain. It's going to be data-driven. And something else to note here is that it's clear that the Fed is deeply divided because some people actually wanted to cut more. Some Fed members didn't want to cut, but as long as the labor market continues to weaken, the Fed must cut rates. And that is exactly what we've said. And on top of that, we've also had, earnings over the last few days. We had earnings from Meta, Microsoft, Google, and so on and so forth. There has been mixed reactions to this, but these companies are each set to invest $100 billion in capital expenditures over the next years. So that is definitely bullish for, the economy. And hopefully that does also capitalize in the crypto markets. Now, on top of that, we also have more Trump news. There's, Trump news every 24 hours. But what we're really focused on is that China-US deal, which is likely happening as you're watching this video. There might already be news on it. That is likely going to be a bullish outcome. Hopefully, as we all know, anything can happen, but that's going to be a big piece of news because Trump said that, if they don't reach an agreement, 100% tariffs are going to come into effect on November 1st. Highly doubt that's going to happen. So likely a good reaction for the markets once this trade deal is over. And on top of that, if you're looking at altcoins right now, you've got to be looking at artificial intelligence. OpenAI is preparing an IPO that could be valued at $1 trillion. That is absolutely insane if that is actually true. An IPO at $1 trillion would literally put this in the top 20 assets by market capitalization. So artificial intelligence is highly, highly in demand right now, and you cannot be sleeping on AI coins. So that's kind of the gist of what happened with the FOMC meeting. We did get the Fed rate cuts. Quantitative tightening is going to end on December 1st. We're not sure what's going to happen for future rate cuts. I think the Fed is downplaying this. I do think there are going to be more rate cuts, but of course, we're going to have to see what happens with the data, labor markets, and inflation. And with all of that for crypto, I do think Bitcoin is going to remain dominant in November. USD value of altcoins likely to go up if Bitcoin makes a new all-time high. Then huge catalyst in December, really the shift in liquidity is going to start happening, and then altcoins may rally quite fast. Of course, my prediction, not financial advice. Nobody has a crystal ball to call this out, but that is what I am thinking. And in the meantime, you can continue dollar cost averaging on your favorite coins, or you can join our Discord. There are tons of plays out there in the base ecosystem and other ecosystems that we are monitoring every single day. We're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about different narratives every day, continuing to share market data and research as it comes available, making sure you guys are aware of what's happening in the space. If that sounds interesting to you, have a look at the first link in the description below. And with that being said, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Peace.